altitude. Controls unresponsive.
8 flights, 8 near tragedies. Some narrowly avoided disaster. Others weren't so lucky. In February 2025, the skies became a battleground for survival. From catastrophic failures mid-air to last-second maneuvers that saved hundreds, we are uncovering the most terrifying aviation incidents of the month. What went wrong? What could have been prevented? And most importantly, which of these disasters worries you the most? Number 1. The night was calm as United Airlines Flight 27 soared through the sky, leaving Denver International Airport behind on its journey to London Heathrow. Passengers settled in for the long transatlantic flight, some dozing off while others flicked through in-flight entertainment. The hum of the engines was steady, a reassuring sound that masked any lurking danger. In the cockpit, the pilots ran routine checks, ensuring all systems were operating smoothly. Then a faint burning smell crept through the cabin, at first barely noticeable, then a thin wisp of smoke curled into the air. Flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances before rushing to investigate. Within moments, panic spread as the smoke thickened.
Mayday, mayday. United 27 declaring an emergency. Smoke in the cabin.
Captain Mark Reynolds radioed to air traffic control.
Chicago O'Hare was the nearest option. The flight had to divert immediately.
Inside the cockpit, Captain Reynolds exhaled, his hands shaking slightly. He turned to First Officer Carter, their silent relief shared in a single exhausted glance. Though shaken, all 234 passengers and crew had made it out safely. No fatalities, no serious injuries. But the scare was real, a reminder of how quickly routine can turn to disaster at 35,000 feet. As news reports flooded in, United Airlines officials praised the crew's quick thinking and emergency response. Investigations into the source of the smoke were already underway. At 10,000 feet, Chicago's control tower confirmed emergency services were on standby. The runway was cleared. The descent was rapid, smoke swirling inside as fire trucks lined up below. Brace for landing. The Boeing 787 slammed onto the runway, tires screeching. Emergency slides deployed, passengers fleeing into the cold night air, coughing and gasping. Firefighters rushed in, tracing the smoke to a malfunctioning electrical component near the rear galley. Inside the cockpit, Captain Reynolds exhaled, his hands trembling. It was over. All 234 passengers and crew had made it out safely. No fatalities, no serious injuries. But for those on board, this was more than just a flight. It was a night where routine turned to chaos, and fate had let them walk away. Number 2. It was February 2nd, 2025. United Airlines Flight 1382, an Airbus A319, was preparing for takeoff at George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston, Texas. The flight was bound for LaGuardia Airport in New York, a routine journey covering approximately 1,400 miles with a flight time of about 3.5 hours. The evening was calm and passengers settled into their seats, unaware that their journey would never even leave the ground. The engines roared to life as the aircraft taxied to the runway, the anticipation of departure building. But then, something went wrong. As the pilots, Captain Daniel Harris and First Officer Emily Carter, pushed the throttles forward for takeoff, the aircraft surged ahead, accelerating down the runway. But within seconds, a shudder rippled through the plane, an unnatural vibration that sent alarms blaring in the cockpit. The right engine was struggling, its readings fluctuating wildly. "Abort! Abort takeoff!" Captain Harris called out, making a split-second decision. The aircraft's speed was rapidly increasing, but stopping it now required immense precision. The brakes engaged, the reverse thrusters roared, and passengers were thrust forward as the plane came to a jarring halt. A tense silence followed before the intercom crackled to life.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have encountered an issue with the right engine and must abort takeoff. Please remain seated.
The cabin filled with murmurs of unease. Outside, ground crews rushed toward the aircraft, their flashlights cutting through the night. Smoke was seen trailing from the right engine. Though no flames were visible, the situation remained critical. Inside the cockpit, The pilots quickly relayed their emergency to air traffic control, requesting immediate assistance. The tension was thick, every second stretching endlessly as the crew prepared for a possible evacuation. With the aircraft now at a complete stop, emergency crews surrounded it, assessing the engine. Fortunately, there was no fire, but caution was paramount. The decision was made. Passengers would disembark on the runway. One by one, they filed out, some shaken, others relieved. The cold night air hit them as airport buses lined up to transport them back to the terminal. Flight attendants guided passengers calmly, ensuring no panic ensued. Though no one was injured, the abrupt halt had left many in shock, their minds replaying the moments of uncertainty. As news of the aborted takeoff spread, United Airlines issued a statement confirming a suspected mechanical issue with the right engine. Engineers began inspecting the Airbus A319, looking for the root cause of the failure. Though shaken, passengers and crew were safe. Proof that quick thinking and decisive action had prevented what could have been a far worse situation. For those aboard Flight 1382, it was a reminder of aviation's unpredictability. They had boarded expecting a routine flight, yet their journey had ended before it even began. Number 3. February 5th, 2025. Qatar Airways Flight QR218, a Boeing 787-9, was set to fly from London Heathrow to Doha, Qatar. The 5,200-kilometer journey was expected to take 6.5 hours. As the aircraft climbed into the sky, passengers settled in, unaware that danger was just ahead. Minutes after takeoff, at 3,000 feet, a flock of birds suddenly struck the aircraft. Several were sucked into the left engine, causing a loud impact and violent vibrations. Alarms blared in the cockpit as Captain Omar Rafiq and First Officer James Bennett quickly assessed the damage. Smoke and a burning smell filled parts of the cabin. Flight attendants reassured nervous passengers, while the pilots declared an emergency. Continuing to Doha was impossible. They had to return to Heathrow immediately. With one engine now failing, Flight QR218 was in a tense situation. Though modern jets are designed to fly with a single engine, the aircraft was heavily loaded with fuel for the long-haul journey. The pilots needed to act fast.
Mayday, mayday! Qatar Airways 218. We have sustained a bird strike. Request immediate return to Heathrow.
Air traffic control quickly cleared an emergency landing path. The aircraft turned back, descending carefully, but the damaged engine's vibrations made it difficult to maintain control. The crew ran through checklists, preparing for a possible rough landing. Inside the cabin, passengers clutched their seats as the airport came back into view. Emergency services were already in position along the runway. The aircraft was coming in faster than usual, its remaining engine working at maximum effort. With absolute precision, Captain Rafiq guided the Boeing 787-9 onto the runway. The landing gear hit the asphalt hard, but the aircraft stayed steady. As it slowed to a stop, emergency vehicles surrounded it within seconds. Fire crews inspected the smoldering engine, ensuring there was no immediate fire risk. Inside the cabin, a moment of silence hung in the air before a wave of relieved sighs and quiet cheers spread through the passengers. The crisis was over. No injuries were reported. Though the event lasted only minutes, it served as a stark reminder of the dangers pilots face, even in routine flights. Bird strikes are an unavoidable risk in aviation, but thanks to the crew's quick thinking and precise training, disaster was averted. As Flight QR218's passengers disembarked safely, news of the incident spread quickly. Qatar Airways praised the pilots and crew for their professionalism, while aviation authorities launched an investigation into the bird activity near Heathrow. For those on board, this was more than just a flight. It was a test of skill, nerves, and luck in the unpredictable world of air travel. Number 4. February 9th, 2025. Ryanair Flight FR4978, a Boeing 737-800, was nearing the end of its 1,500-kilometer journey from Dublin, Ireland to Barcelona El Prat Airport, Spain. The flight, lasting around 2 hours and 30 minutes, had been smooth until the final moments of landing. As the aircraft descended towards Barcelona, the pilots noticed an unresponsive hydraulic system. The rudder and landing gear controls became sluggish, signaling a possible hydraulic failure. Inside the cockpit, Captain Liam O'Connor and First Officer Miguel Torres worked rapidly, manually adjusting the controls. Meanwhile, in the cabin, passengers felt an uneasy turbulence. Flight attendants sensed something was wrong, but maintained calm, preparing for a possible emergency landing. As the aircraft touched down, it jerked violently to the left, causing a moment of panic. The pilots struggled to keep it aligned, but the damaged hydraulics made steering nearly impossible. The 737 skidded off the runway, its wheels digging into the soft grass beside the tarmac. Emergency sirens blared as fire trucks and rescue crews rushed toward the aircraft. Within moments, the crew initiated evacuation procedures. Emergency slides deployed, and passengers hurriedly exited the aircraft, some shaken but unharmed. Firefighters and paramedics inspected the aircraft, confirming no fire or structural damage. Ryanair officials praised the pilot's quick thinking and the emergency team's rapid response. Investigators later found that a hydraulic fluid leak had caused the failure. Though all 178 passengers and crew walked away safely, the incident was a stark reminder of how even a routine landing can become a life-threatening challenge in an instant. Number 5. February 15, 2025. Alaska Airlines Flight AS322, a Boeing 737 MAX 9, took off from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, bound for San Diego, California. The journey, expected to cover 1,050 miles in approximately 2 hours and 30 minutes, began smoothly. Passengers settled in, unaware that within minutes, a hidden danger would force the flight into a critical decision. As the aircraft climbed past 10,000 feet, a pressurization warning light flashed in the cockpit. Captain James Reynolds and First Officer Emily Carter quickly checked the cabin pressure levels. Something wasn't right. Though no decompression had occurred yet, the system indicated a potential failure. In the cabin, flight attendants noticed passengers feeling lightheaded, and a subtle hissing sound hinted at an issue with the pressurization system. The pilots had to act fast. At 14,000 feet, the warning intensified. The crew feared a possible rapid decompression, which could endanger everyone on board. Oxygen masks had not deployed yet, but if the pressure dropped suddenly, it could be catastrophic. The decision was made: return to Seattle immediately. Captain Reynolds radioed Mayday to air traffic control.
Seattle Tower, Alaska 322 declaring an emergency. Pressurization failure, requesting immediate return.
The aircraft leveled off and began its descent. Passengers, now sensing urgency, gripped their armrests as the plane turned back. Within 15 minutes, Flight AS322 was on final approach. Emergency services stood by as the aircraft touched down smoothly, avoiding any further complications. As the plane taxied to the gate, a wave of relief spread through the cabin. Passengers were calm but shaken, relieved to have landed safely. Flight attendants reassured them, while engineers quickly inspected the aircraft to determine the cause of the pressurization fault. Investigators later found a malfunctioning outflow valve, which could have led to a serious decompression if left unchecked. All 178 passengers and crew were safely rebooked on another flight. While the incident ended without injury, it was a stark reminder of how even a minor system failure at high altitudes can spiral into a life-threatening emergency. Number 6. February 17, 2025, Delta Connection Flight 4819, operated by Endeavour Air, was on its final approach to Toronto Pearson International Airport, Canada. The Bombardier CRJ-900LR had departed from New York's LaGuardia Airport, covering a flight distance of 357 miles in approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes. Passengers were moments away from landing when disaster struck, one that would leave the aircraft overturned on the runway. The approach to Toronto was anything but routine. A strong winter storm had settled over the airport, with gusty winds and reduced visibility, making conditions treacherous. Captain Robert Hale and First Officer Daniel Moore fought against the turbulence, relying on their instruments to guide them. As the plane descended below 500 feet, the winds intensified, causing the aircraft to sway. Passengers gripped their seats as the aircraft struggled to align with the runway. Suddenly, just seconds before touchdown, a violent gust pushed the CRJ-900 off course, forcing the pilots to react instantly. The aircraft slammed onto the runway at an unstable angle. The right landing gear collapsed, sending the plane skidding sideways. Within seconds, the left wing dug into the ground, and the aircraft flipped onto its roof, coming to a halt in a terrifying position. Inside, the cabin was plunged into chaos. Oxygen masks fell, overhead compartments burst open, and passengers screamed as they hung upside down in their seats. The flight attendants, despite injuries, immediately worked to maintain order, shouting instructions over the panic. Airport emergency services raced onto the runway, their flashing lights cutting through the storm. Fire crews sprayed foam to prevent a fire, while rescue teams rushed to extract passengers. The emergency exits were used despite the aircraft's inverted position, with responders pulling survivors out one by one. Amidst the wreckage, 21 people sustained injuries, some with broken bones and head trauma, but miraculously, all 80 occupants survived. Investigators later determined that the combination of severe crosswinds and a hard landing led to the collapse of the landing gear. While the aircraft was written off, the pilot's quick thinking and the resilience of the cabin crew prevented a fatal outcome. For the passengers of Flight 4819, it was a day that turned a routine landing into a terrifying fight for survival, proving once again that in aviation, every second counts. Number 7, February 25th, 2025. An American Airlines Airbus A319 en route from Boston Logan International Airport to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport was on its final approach. The 395-mile flight had taken just over an hour, and passengers prepared for landing. But as the aircraft descended toward the runway, an unexpected crisis forced the pilots to abort the landing at the last second, narrowly avoiding a potential disaster. The approach to Washington National Airport was routine until the final moments. Captain Mark Reynolds and First Officer Sarah Carter had received clearance to land on runway 19, but traffic was heavy. The airport's proximity to the Pentagon and restricted airspace made it one of the most challenging locations to navigate. At 1,000 feet, the pilots could see the runway lights through mild cloud cover. Everything seemed normal, until an alarming call from air traffic control came through.
American 225, go around immediately. Another aircraft is still on the runway.
Without hesitation, Captain Reynolds pushed the throttles forward. The aircraft's engines roared as it climbed sharply back into the sky. Passengers gasped as the sudden acceleration pinned them back into their seats. In the cockpit, the pilots worked rapidly to stabilize the aircraft and follow ATC's new instructions. ATC.
American 225, climb to 3,000 feet, turn left heading 180.
Captain Reynolds.
Roger, climbing to 3,000, American 225.
Meanwhile, on the ground, another jet, a small private aircraft, had not cleared the runway in time, creating a potential collision risk. The quick response from both ATC and the flight crew had prevented a disaster. With the aircraft safely back in the air, the pilots coordinated with ATC for another approach. The tension in the cabin slowly eased as the plane circled back. Within minutes, the clearance to land was granted. This time, the runway was clear. The A319 descended smoothly, touching down safely. A wave of relief swept over the passengers and crew. The incident was later classified as an air traffic miscommunication, emphasizing the importance of vigilance in busy airports. Thanks to quick decision-making and precise coordination, a catastrophe was avoided. Number 8, February 26, 2025. A routine flight turned into a catastrophic tragedy when a small aircraft departing from Baltimore crashed into the icy slopes of Equinox Mountain near Manchester, Vermont. The aircraft had been in the air for just over an hour, covering a distance of approximately 350 miles before disaster struck. At 8:30 a.m. local time, the plane went down, sending a distress signal moments before impact. Shortly before the crash, air traffic control in Albany, New York, received a concerning transmission from the aircraft.
Albany Center, we're experiencing severe icing, struggling to maintain altitude. Copy that, maintain heading. Are you able to hold altitude? Negative. We're losing lift. Requesting immediate diversion.
The aircraft had flown into unexpected severe turbulence, with freezing rain rapidly coating the wings and engines. At 6,000 feet, the pilot attempted to regain control, but the aircraft began an uncontrollable descent toward the rugged, snow-covered terrain of Equinox Mountain. As the aircraft lost altitude, the crew fought desperately against the controls. ATC repeatedly tried to reach them, but the final transmission was chilling.
We're going down. Impact IMI.
Moments later, radar contact was lost. The plane vanished into the wilderness. The wreckage was located deep within the frozen forests of Equinox Mountain, partially buried under snow. The impact was devastating, scattering debris across the slopes. Rescue teams battled the harsh winter storm to reach the site. With visibility near zero and treacherous conditions, reaching survivors, if any, became a race against time. Helicopters struggled against the wind, forcing ground crews to trek through knee-deep snow. As investigations began, authorities focused on the role of icing, turbulence, and possible mechanical failure in the crash. This tragedy underscored the dangers of winter flying, reminding the world how quickly nature can turn the skies into a death trap.